The head of private school, Epsom College, has been found dead alongside her husband and 7-year-old daughter. Police say that the bodies of Emma Pattison, her husband George, and daughter Lettie were found at the private boarding school in the early hours of Sunday morning. Surrey police said that they are confident the tragedy is an isolated incident and there is no third-party involvement.
Family annihilation sounds incongruent. Even saying it just doesn't make sense. Family, that's what we expect to have a foundation of safety, security, a place where we can go when we require an anchor, surrounded by people who love us. And we all know that family can also personify really negative experiences. But for the most part, when we talk about family, we're talking about the stereotype of expectation regarding the security that it presents us. When we think about annihilation, we're talking about the absolute destruction, wiping out of people. And when they are held in the same sentence to describe an event, it's very difficult to wrap your head around it. And the case of Emma Pattison and her family, that's going to absolutely follow this playbook, where it's almost impossible to wrap our heads around the fact that these kind of things can play out in a civilized society. And also we're going to take a look at what we expect to see in the backgrounds of those who carry out family annihilation. Because unlike a lot of crimes that we see with violent offenders, there isn't necessarily escalation that's as obvious to people looking from the outside in. The signs and red flags are not quite as obvious to those people who love the individuals who lose their lives. Also, if you're new to my channel, my name is Emma Kenny, so hello and thank you for joining me. If you're new and you like my content, why don't you subscribe, put your notifications on, and you'll never miss an episode. And I release 2 on this main channel every single week. I also do full-length ones on my Patreon and YouTube membership, so thank you to everybody who is literally supporting me there. You guys are incredible, and you are why I can make this content so regularly. Let's talk about Emma Pattison and also her beautiful daughter as well, because the backdrop of this tragedy is an incredibly successful woman. Emma Pattison, at the time of her death, was the head teacher of Epsom College. Now, Epsom College, if you Google it, beautiful. Absolutely stunning. It's a prestigious private school. It's in Surrey, a beautiful part of the UK. Emma actually grew up in Lincolnshire. She attended Kesteven and Sleaford High Schools, and then she went on to university to study at the University of Leeds. And people said that Emma was just an absolute guiding light. She had a passion for singing. She was just a really lovely human being. And during my research, I genuinely have not been able to find a single iota of negativity towards this woman. Everyone who had some kind of contact with her, whether that was minimal or whether that was maximal, they all say the same things. She was just absolutely committed to bringing education in the best way to young people, and that she had an energy and a lightness about her character that made people want to be around her. So 1995 to 1999, she goes to University of Leeds. She studies a BA in French and English literature. She didn't actually go into teaching straight away. She did a Thomas Cook graduate scheme. We all know about these schemes where basically you're placed on a fast track to management. Apparently, she really wanted to go and travel the world. She thought it was going to take her to some exotic places, but instead she found herself based in Bromley in South London. Not quite the Maldives, shall we say. And it was during this time where she was obviously looking at one particular type of career that she realised that she was far more suited to teaching. And that's what led her to pursue changing careers. So in 2001 to 2002, she did a PGCE at the University of Warwick. Gorgeous university, gorgeous area of the world. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a postgraduate certificate in education. It means that you can go and teach in school. And at this point, she began teaching English as a foreign language. Now, in 2002, she worked as a French and Spanish teacher at Lutterworth College, and she later became the deputy head at St John's School in Leatherhead. And then in September 2016, she joined Croydon High School. It's a very, very prestigious girls' school. And you can imagine, can't you, the kind of competition that you're facing when you're getting jobs like that. So she's clearly climbing through the ranks very, very quickly, and she's ending up in very successful positions. Now, like I said, in January 2022, she's appointed head of Epsom College. Now, just to bring this into sharp focus for you about how well she was doing in her career, she was the 14th ever head teacher of Epsom College, but she was also the first woman to hold that role. Now that's a big deal because she's changing the landscape of that particular school, and historically that's an event that a female has taken the lead. And again, what is it telling you about her? Can you imagine how many people will have gone for that role? How much competition there'll have been, and yet it was Emma who got that role. And at the time she said, I am delighted and honoured to have been appointed head of Epsom College. It is a school I've long admired with an enviable reputation. Now, the fact that it's £42,000 per year means you have parents who are customers. And unless you've worked in the education sector as I have, and for those of you who've worked in teaching or in line with education, you will understand what I'm talking about, but many people wouldn't. So just to explain how challenging it is to be a head teacher, you are not a teacher anymore. You are running a company. Your customers are the parents, and essentially the output, the product, are the students. They have to do super well academically in these situations because the parents, the customer, are paying you a shed load of money to make sure that that happens. So it isn't simply academic excellence that is required when you are a head teacher. You're not just responsible for that. You're running a business, you're a CEO. It's all about bringing in the money. It's about basically ensuring the smooth running of that entire situation. So there are huge amounts of pressure on teachers who get to that point and become heads. And essentially, you have to be able to compartmentalize a lot of things because you're dealing with a whole range of different issues from, as I said, the customers who are the parents with expectations to the product, which is the children who are going through and achieving. And of course, the money itself, which needs to be raised to keep the school going, on top of dealing with a whole range of other personalities who come in and give money to the school and sponsor certain situations within that climate. So to manage that, you have to be able to put on a mask. You have to be dealing with your own stuff in your background of your life, and you have to be smiling and professional in other aspects. And I think that I'm saying that at this point to just highlight how many women and men who are in challenging personal situations, but are also very successful alternately in their business life, they get used to wearing this mask. It makes people not question what's going on behind the scenes. And I think for Emma, that was certainly something that was playing out. So we're talking about the mindset of a woman who's incredibly resilient, unbelievably successful, very, very intelligent, potentially living in what I would consider an unsatisfactory life with her partner. And that can be incredibly challenging because when all the rest of your life is successful and you have this fault line running through your family, you are used to fixing things. That's how things work everywhere else. And ultimately, it's so frustrating when you can't fix the thing that you devoted a lot of your life to. And that's why we see abuse victims often stay in really dangerous situations. Now, the husband in this case is a guy called George Pattison. He was 39 at the time of his death. Emma was 45. He was born in March 1983. He had some decent trappings to his life. He attended Barton Court Grammar School. That was between 1994 and 2001. And from what I can tell from people who knew him, and there isn't a great deal out there about this man, he was somebody that really didn't cause issues in his childhood or youth. His peers said he was just a nice guy back then. He wasn't somebody who stood up for the wrong reasons. He had friends. It wasn't that he was super popular or super arrogant. He was just a decent human being. And often, when we look back at the backgrounds of family annihilators, we don't see these obvious big red flags, at least in their youth. Often this is something that develops more slowly over time. Now, Pattison was obviously intelligent. He was a chartered accountant, and it is tough to become a chartered accountant. So academically, he's very clever. He has the acumen to succeed without a doubt. And he was actually listed on Companies House as being the director of a management consultancy firm called Tanglewood in 2016. I would say it was not where his passion lay. He didn't do financially very well from his accountancy. I believe that his interests, beliefs and pursuits lay in things that were far more exciting that he wasn't actually able to achieve, and that was probably a point of resentment for him. Now, Pattison and Emma actually got married in 2011. They got married in Kingston in Jamaica, and that's because Pattison was born there, so he had a lot of links. And you can imagine the backdrop to beginning your marriage in such a beautiful place. Everything is to play for. Everything is positive. They clearly loved each other. They were hoping for a joyful future together. But that isn't going to happen. I wouldn't be talking about Emma in this video if that were the case. They were also blessed with an absolutely beautiful little girl, a little girl called Elette Francesca. What a beautiful name. I will never forget Elette Francesca because it just stands out, doesn't it? And she was 7 years of age at the time of her death. 7 years of age. Elette Francesca. They called her Lettie lovingly. That was how everybody referred to her. So this family unit that really is in a scenario, because of Emma's career in particular, where they can enjoy the trappings of so many positive things. For example, a grace and favour house. As part of the package of being head teacher of the school, she's given a home. Now just think about that. The pressure's taken off if you've got a home that you can sell, and then all of a sudden you've got quite a lot of collateral behind you and you've got a beautiful home that you're living in on site. And whilst that can be in your face because you never get to truly leave the job, it can also reduce a lot of the stresses and strains. So for many people, what we will be seeing right now is a huge celebration. But you see, that's the issue when it comes down to family annihilators. It's all very well when you consider most relationships that are positive and you think, when I'm succeeding, for example, in my life, my husband is my greatest cheerleader. I'm sure that most of you who've had positive experiences in life with partners will completely appreciate what I'm saying. When we see somebody flying, we're on their coattails going with them, thinking, thank you for letting me come with you. We want them to succeed. We're not looking at them in resentful and jealous ways. We're not thinking, how dare you succeed more than me? Because by proxy, you're succeeding because they're succeeding, and families are about that. But where family annihilators are concerned, it can cause resentment. Emma, as I said, was described by people who knew her as being a wonderful teacher, a delightful person, somebody with this incredibly distinguished career. And just to say about Lettie, aside from being breathtakingly beautiful, was described as razor smart, curious, and disarmingly cute. And she was disarmingly cute. I mean, I think that most of us will agree that when you look at children, they are all just so beautiful. Everything about babies and children, the way they move, the way they smile, the way they laugh, the way they engage, the way they play, the way they frown, it's just the most perfect moment in so many lives, because children are unbelievably perfect in every single way. And I look at every child and just cannot believe that anybody would ever want to harm even a hair on their head. Now, bear in mind, because this is a new job, Emma hasn't been there for very long. She's only been there a few months, and they have been selling their other home because clearly they don't need the other home anymore. Now, it turns out that Pattison hadn't been spending a lot of time at the property on the school grounds. In fact, until about 3 weeks before the murders take place, he'd been living separately. He'd been living at their old home, which was worth about 1.5 million. It was in Caterham, and he was there because he was waiting for the sale to go through. However, we can all agree that you don't need to necessarily be in situ in the home that you're selling to make sure the sale goes through, because it's something legal. It's not something you have to be on the site for. So that does play into this possibility that there were tensions underlying the relationship and problems within it. And also, what does that present Emma with? It presents Emma with a pause. It presents Emma with some space and time to think about a life without Pattison. If your partner, who you've been with constantly for a long period of time, is suddenly away from you, and you're living in a home that now you don't have to worry about paying for, and you've got your daughter present with you, and you're forming new alliances with people around you in the work that you're doing, and all of a sudden you have space to conceive of what life might be like if that partner was no longer in your life, I think that Emma will have had that time and opportunity. So this has probably brought her to a point that is making her really consider whether she wants a future with Pattison at all. Also, neighbours who had seen him flitting between the houses essentially before he handed eventually the keys over to the new owners, they said they often saw him through the windows of his house drinking wine. And I, again, can only say this from my point of view. So this is not something that is evidenced, shall we say. I can't say that this is absolutely an accurate fact. I'm just reading into what I understand about this situation. I think he has some dependency issues. I think he was drinking more than he should be drinking, and I think he was abusing prescription drugs. So I think that that is really important to note because it's, again, a big red flag where annihilation of families is concerned. So let's talk about the absolutely horrific, brutal crimes that took place on the 4th of February 2023. Now, when I say this day apparently set off so ordinarily, it was just a lovely, normal day. Emma watched a rugby match with her friends at her house. They all left about 7 p.m. Then Emma and the family got a Chinese takeaway at 9:36 p.m. In fact, the delivery driver said, when they were questioned, because obviously they were one of the last people to see her alive, and so it's important, firstly, to make sure that they're not a suspect, but also to gather the information that can lead people to piece together the puzzle of this crime. That delivery driver who dropped off the food said Emma had a smiley face and she seemed okay. But again, I caveat that because she's used to presenting. She's used to looking like everything's okay. And we've all done it. I would imagine every single one of you watching me right now, you have had a moment in time where something bad is happening. Maybe you're in an argument. Maybe you've had some terrible news. Maybe you've failed or been made redundant. Something's happened and the door goes and you open it and you're the nicest, smiliest, friendliest person. You just paint it on. You know how you're meant to appear and you act that part accordingly. And like I said, Emma is a compartmentalizer. She's somebody who's done so many things in her life positively. She's so effective. She's so resilient in a million other ways that she'll know how to do it. So even though she's smiling at that moment in time, that doesn't mean there were not things that were bad playing out behind that door once it's closed. Now, one of the things that happens is that Emma calls her sister that evening. Her sister's called Deborah Kirk, clearly an absolutely devoted sibling. And immediately, Deborah was really worried because she gets this call about 11 p.m. And at this point, Emma confides in her sister that Pattison's hit her and hit their dog, Bella. So something is playing out that has led Pattison to not only lose control and to abuse his wife, but he's also abused the dog. And I think when you consider that he's not just hit Emma, he's hit the dog as well, that just speaks of a desire to be violent. Because even if you're in a domestically abusive situation and you're the partner, usually you're being hit by the person who is angry with you. When they start to do that to the dog or the children, etc., it speaks about this intrinsic core within their nature that has this capacity for malevolence and aggression. Now, understandably, her sister's really concerned, more so because Emma says, I need someone to come over. And Deborah said that the voice that she heard when her sister was speaking was more concerned. It wasn't terrified, it was concerned. It was more like she'd assessed the situation and just didn't feel safe, and obviously believed that her sister was going to make her feel safe. Also, I think we can all agree that it can be quite scary to confide in a friend or a sibling or a member of our family that something terrible has happened to us at the hand of our partner. Because even if there've been rumblings in the relationship, even if there's been issues that a sibling has seen, shall we say, in the relationship that suggests there could be some abuse there, when you're actually saying the words, he has hit me, it's a no going back territory. It's a no going back territory. That sibling or that friend or that family member, they will never see your partner in any way, shape or form the same again because they will see them as the abuser they are. So you can imagine that there would be concern in Emma's voice. Now, Deborah and her lovely husband, Mike Miller, they get straight into an Uber and they get to Emma's home just after 11 p.m. So just imagine the kind of support network that's there. Emma calls her sister. Within minutes, that sister has got in a car with her husband. And I think it's really powerful that she takes her husband because that's a message, isn't it, to Pattison. Mike Miller's going to be there. That's a man. You might have hit a woman, you might have hit a dog. And Deborah, obviously, as a sister, would be at risk because she's a woman and physically we're not as strong. But Mike Miller's gone. And the reason for that is he's basically going to be a strong arm should anything play out. So this is a real way of cradling Emma into safety. And that should have been how all this plays out. Emma should have been cradled into safety. But that isn't what happens, because as soon as Deborah gets in that car, gets in the Uber with her husband, she's trying to call her sister and there's no answer. And that just creates that dread. By the time Emma's sister arrives with her husband and there's been absolutely no response, They realise that something untoward must have happened. Why is she not answering the phone? And one of the things that they note when they get there is all the lights are on. So, of course, they should be answering the phone, someone at least, because the lights are on. It's not indicating that no one's suddenly present. Why isn't anyone answering the phone? The cars are all in the driveway. No one's left. And you can just feel, can't you, that bile rising in their throats as they're thinking, this does not make sense. Now, I have great respect for Mike, Deborah's husband, because he decided that he needed to go into the house first. And I feel that that protective mechanism within him, that desire to make sure that he was fully present for his wife and protecting of that wife, is why he chose to do that. Because he could have gone in with her. But there must have been something about the eeriness of that situation that made him think, no, I'm going to go and see whether everything's okay. Because I believe that somewhere deep in the pit of his stomach, he knew it was never going to be okay again. Once he enters, he just comes out and says, you're not going in. They call an ambulance, and then the paramedics arrive on the scene shortly afterwards. Once they're there, very quickly, they are able to state that Emma, Lettie, and Pattison are all dead. So there was nobody rushed to hospital. There was no trying to save the lives of any of them because it was too late. This happened just after midnight on the 5th of February. So we're talking about in a matter of hours, from having a Chinese takeaway, from going and seeing a rugby match, from hanging out and being with friends. All of the family are dead. Every single one annihilated. Whilst I believe it was obvious to every single person who saw that scene as to what had happened, they still have to do the autopsies, of course. So that was carried out by Dr. Ashley Fegan Earle. It was carried out at East Surrey Hospital 3 days after the shooting. I cannot even begin to imagine the agony psychologically for anybody doing that where a child is involved, and particularly in light of the kind of death that Lettie experienced. It must stain the conscience of those individuals having to carry these autopsies out. It must do, because there is something so inhumane about a child losing their life anyway. But a child being callously murdered by a parent in the most heinous of ways, it's too terrible to even imagine, let alone physically have to deal with. The senior coroner was Richard Travers. One of the things that they got from Pattison was a toxicology report, and they actually found he had 243 milligrams of alcohol per 100 millilitres of blood. Now, if you think about that just in layman's term, it's basically associated with high to extreme levels of intoxication. So you're getting to that point where you're actually causing yourself potential coma. That's how high and extreme the levels were in his blood. So he's been mixing alcohol and prescription drugs, and that creates a very dangerous mix. And some people could say, okay, well, maybe that's why this has played out. This guy got so intoxicated, lost all his inhibitions, that he then went ahead and carried out the unspeakable. Was it therefore truly in his nature, or was it just his outlandish behaviour in the moment sparked by this intoxication? And I would challenge that. I would say when somebody has planned to do something unspeakably evil, sometimes they need a little bit Dutch courage to push them further. They know they're going to do it, they've planned to do it, they're prepared to do it, they've premeditated it, but you know what? It's a little bit easier to take the edge off, particularly if you're going to take your own life as well. So he didn't afford his victims the same level of peace, shall we say, in that moment as he afforded himself. Because when you're highly intoxicated, it's going to be far less terrifying to do what you have to do in the end, ultimately, to take your own life. So I do not give him the sympathy or empathy that some may when looking at the fact that he acted in an intoxicated state. I think he did that because it made it easier for him. Now, no one can actually say what happened leading up to the deaths on the 4th of February, as in the only people who know those final things that happened before ultimately they died are the family themselves and God. But one of the things that the police were very quickly able to say was it was definitely a murder-suicide, and they believed that the way it played out was that Pattison shot Emma and then his daughter with his shotgun, and then he killed himself. Now, Emma, she received shotgun wounds to her chest and her abdomen, and when I think about the chest and the abdomen, I just think about how feminine it is. I think about the breasts that I used to feed my baby. I think about the womb area that I birthed my children. I think of it in absolute feminine terms, and he literally blew those areas apart. Her cause of death is noted as gunshot wounds and shock and hemorrhage, because of course she would have bled out. Anybody who has seen shotgun impact, you will be aware it is catastrophic. And when people talk about the differences in guns, if you think about a pistol shooting, you know, often it's quite difficult to land a shot because you have to be very accurate. When you're talking about a shotgun, you can stand pretty far away from that person, launch it, and it's just so catastrophic the way it almost explodes that you can cause impact even if you're not the most accurate shot whatsoever. And the wounds are horrific. The wounds are horrific. I'm sure some of you watch films where they've enacted those, and you will see it literally puts holes right through people, and large holes too. And the reason I'm saying that is because this man, this father, this husband, after doing what I've just described to his lovely wife, described by others as lightness to be around, he then took that gun and he shot Lettie in the head. He shot a 7-year-old child with a shotgun in the head. He then turned the gun on himself, put it in his mouth basically, and then blew his own brains out. But I cannot move past that feeling of rage when I imagine what he did to that child and how she will have looked after that blast from that shotgun. Also, the reason that I believe that he premeditated this is because he had live ammo. And even though they're in a middle-class school where obviously they'll probably do things like shooting or they'll have gamekeepers, etc., the truth is live ammo was not kept at the school rifle range. So this guy had brought it. This man was prepared. Understandably, when news got out that Emma, this much-loved teacher, had been killed and that her daughter had been murdered too, people were utterly devastated. Schools that she'd worked with came out and talked about her. One of the statements was she was relentlessly positive and upbeat. Her smile and her laughter were infectious. She had integrity in buckets. She was loyal, warm and kind. Emma lit up the lives of those around her. She will be sorely missed, but not forgotten. On the 15th of February 2023, the police released a tribute from Emma's family. The family said, Emma and Lettie were inseparable, and we take comfort in that they will remain so. That breaks my heart. It's so beautiful, isn't it? Yes, they are no longer present in this universe, but they will be cradled without doubt in my mind elsewhere in another paradigm together and separate from the man who killed them. Now, of course, one of the big questions in this case is, how does Pattison have a shotgun licence and is it lawful? Because you have to have one in the UK if you have a shotgun, and rightly so, because you can do horrendous damage, and if they're in the wrong hands, that can happen. Now, in 2012, Pattison did actually obtain a lawful shotgun licence. He was given a certificate number originally issued by Surrey Police. But in 2016, the police get notified of a domestic violence incident. And it's not going to be what you think, guys, because what actually happened in that incident is that there's an allegation that Emma's assaulted Pattison. Now, I'm going to tell you immediately, that's BS. That is BS, and we'll go into that a little bit more shortly. But this is what they're told. Now, whenever there is a crime that's potentially played out and is being investigated, if you have a shotgun certificate, or indeed shotguns, they will remove these temporarily whilst they look at the actual allegation, and then if it's found to be okay, they'll return them. So then we get to December 2016. At this point, there's a renewal application that gets granted. 2022. There's a further renewal application that's granted. Now, the 2022 application, it requires basically a completion of a new form, and it's a form that needs to be there. And the reason for that is they're asking for the details of Pattison's GP, and they want to know some medical questions. They want to have you answer, have you ever been diagnosed or treated for any number of medical conditions, and these include depression or anxiety. Now, Pattison lies. He responds No. But the truth is Pattison has suffered. So he's been in touch with an online doctor, and from 2019 to 2021 had actually been prescribed a significant amount of propranolol. Now, propranolol, some of you will have had because you'll have had heart conditions. So it slows your heart rate down. So basically it makes it easier for your heart to pump blood around your body. It's usually given for people to deal with high blood pressure and other heart problems. But it's also been noted that for some people, it can help with the physical symptoms of anxiety. It can prevent people from sweating and shaking, which can be something that increases anxiety when you're already struggling with it, which is why you're shaking and why you're sweating. And because it's used to treat things like social and situational anxiety, even though it doesn't treat the symptoms themselves, as in the psychological disturbance that's causing it, it just can relax the person so that they can go about their business and deal with scenarios that they wouldn't be able to deal with otherwise. So he's had propranolol because of this. And with respect, that is likely to have affected whether he'd be given that shotgun license. And the very fact that he's chosen to say, no, I haven't been treated for this, means he's lied, and he's lied with purpose. He wants that shotgun. He knows that that shotgun license might be impacted by him telling the truth about the fact that he's been being treated with this drug. So the truth is we don't actually know whether he would have been refused that shotgun certificate if he'd admitted that he'd had this treatment. But, like I said, it's not right that he lied to the police about that. Now, Chief Superintendent Clive Davies, this is after the deaths had occurred, he talked about the 2016 abuse allegation. He said the allegation of assault made by Mr. Pattison against Mrs. Pattison in 2016 was investigated thoroughly at the time. Although Mrs. Pattison never made any allegations of domestic abuse or coercive controlling behaviour against her husband, our understanding and response to coercive controlling behaviour is significantly more advanced now, and our officers and staff are trained to recognise the signs, the homicide timeline and high risk factors. Looked at through the lens of what ultimately happened, the incident in 2016 was clearly part of Mr. Pattison's controlling behaviour. And the reason that I think that's so important is because when you look back and you go, ooh, Emma Pattison apparently was abusive towards her husband back in 2016, and you take that as read, you can buy into this belief that there was something about her personality that was problematic. And then you could even say, and yes, she was a head teacher. She'd climbed through the ranks really quickly in her career. Maybe she took no prisoners. Maybe she was controlling. And that completely skews the truth about this lovely woman. What he did in 2016 was he clearly punished her. He lied to the police about her behaviour. The police came out and obviously investigated and, thank the Lord, found absolutely no reasons for this man actually doing it. In fact, he should have been done for wasting police time. But what's the message? The message he's given to Emma Pattison there is, you tread very carefully or bad things will happen to you. And let's just bear in mind, if you're a teacher and you've got a criminal record for coercive control, forget your teaching career. Forget it. Because you have ultimately broken the law, and you've broken the law in a serious way. So he is letting her know, eggshells, tread on them very carefully, because I am powerful, I am controlling, and I can get you one way or another. And so she will have had that knowledge back in 2016. My God, this man is willing to speak to the police about me. And you know what's really heartbreaking? There are reasons why Emma Pattison should have been speaking to the police about Pattison's behaviour, because he was abusive. Now, there was a letter from Deborah Kirk, her sister. She actually shared a series of letters with the Sunday Times, and she wanted people to know that Emma had been the victim of domestic abuse, that she'd been forced to isolate from her friends. We all know that. That's page 1 in the abuser's playbook. Break down any of your foundations of support. Isolate you from your family. Make it so that people can't see what I am doing to you. Make it so that you have problems in relationships because of the separateness, which means that people withdraw support. And then I have you all to myself. Deborah said, I did see the relationship as abusive. I did, and I told her so. I think, though, the sound of any voice of a caring loved one saying the same thing over and over again is something one becomes deaf to. She said, it seems that only when external professional voices used the word abuse that she was able to listen, to have the perspective she needed. When someone entirely impartial called this what it was, the lens shifted and she realised that the damage would be in staying, not leaving. And I think that that is such a powerful message to everyone out there who is potentially considering that maybe they're in a relationship that's abusive. Listen to what Deborah said. She's saying that time and time again, as a family member, we will tell you, you need to leave, this is abuse. But the problem is, because you have these relationships with people that are long-standing, because you have often dismissed what they've said in the past, because we do with our siblings, we do with our family, because they love us in spite of ourselves, it can be really hard to hear that what they are saying is true. And often that can lead to fractures in relationships. But when people who have no skin in the game, when people who haven't got a relationship with your partner suddenly say, you're being abused, it can be such an enormous chime in our head. All of a sudden, you get that sense of coming out of that unconsciousness when it comes down to what's truly playing on, and you get into sharp focus the fact that people who don't really know you, who don't have to care for you, are going, your life is an abusive life. And for Emma, that was starting to wake her up. And bear in mind, Emma Pattison psychologically will be somebody who works hard at things, tries to fix things. She'll have been in situations where she will have found solutions. Her mindset is one of success. She's probably been thinking, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way for him to get better. I'll find a way for my family to work and thrive, because that's how she's worked in every other avenue. And that's the other thing that's really problematic. People often ask me when I'm doing interviews on TV or on the radio about, are you more likely to be abused if you're a sensitive person? Because there's this idea that you have to have a level of vulnerability if you end up in an abusive situation. And that's so damaging, because that means that every confident person who's brilliant in so many areas of their life, who ends up in an abusive situation, can't look at themselves as being abused, because they say, well, I don't fit the markers for being an abused individual. Maybe I'm the problem in the relationship. I just need to work harder. What I always try to get across is any man, any woman can end up, no matter how confident, charismatic, successful they are, in an abusive situation, because predators and abusers are so effective at making you feel that you're the problem, making you feel that you need to do better, making you believe that you've done something wrong. And they take the love, the purity, the gift that you've given them of sharing those feelings and use it against you. That's how they manipulate. So anyone can fall foul of these situations. And the more confident you are, the more likely you are to believe that somehow you can sort this out, and you can't. But because people have started to speak to Emma about this, she started to listen. And Deborah said she went as far as to give Emma the book Stay or Leave. So it's a guide on whether to remain in a relationship. And she said that she genuinely believed that after she'd read that, she had decided to leave. And for Deborah, she thought, Emma's going to be a success story. She's going to be a survivor. She's going to make it through. She's going to make it out. She's going to live a life that she deserves. Now, during a meeting, this is just a weekend before her death, it seemed that Emma had decided that indeed she was going to leave her husband for good. And you can imagine why. She's got the new house on the grounds. She's got her daughter with her. She's thinking, maybe, just maybe, I can make it by myself. And we all know divorce is messy. We all know it costs money. But suddenly there are some foundations and stability that's been offered to Emma that may mean that a new start is absolutely viable. And of course, we can also say at this moment in time, there's probably a lot of dynamics going on in Emma's relationship with Pattison. For example, they've been selling a house. It's horrifically stressful selling a house. Any house move is challenging. So we can imagine those fractures are being exacerbated. Also, she started this new job at Epsom College. She's going to have a lot of strain emotionally and psychologically in making that move and transition, getting to know the new place and know the new people and deal with all the things that go with a new job. And there are obviously going to be some struggles. We expect that. In messages to a friend of Emma's, she wrote, I have a new job. I have to live on campus as it's a boarding school. We're trying to sort the house out now, bit of a nightmare. Of course it is. Anybody who's ever had a house move, it is a nightmare. Particularly if you're like me and you think, I can do it on the cheap. I'll just hire my own box lorry. I'll just move all my furniture myself with a few family members, and didn't realise that would take 16 hours and pull my back out permanently forever and a day. Genuinely, if I've learnt one lesson, it's pay professionals. It's far better for everybody involved. But it's stressful, isn't it? So the couple had sold their family home in Caterham, Surrey. And as I said, they'd been living apart because they'd been waiting for the sale to complete. So these are all things that would have increased stress. And what do we talk about when it comes down to violent offenders and stress? Yeah, people with violence within them, when they get more stressed, they get more violent. As I said, he'd only been there 3 weeks before the murder, living in situ with Emma Pattison. So this was playing out as a new scenario for all involved, and all of them being together, that had only been for 3 weeks. As I said, he'd been living elsewhere. Now, a neighbour who knew Pattison said that on reflection, one of the things that really stood out as far as they were concerned was that Pattison was very jealous of Emma's success. Apparently, he'd wanted to launch a wine import business, which I think sounds rather romantic, doesn't it? I'll just launch a wine import business. What do you actually do? I'm an accountant. Are you qualified in wine? Not at all. Have you got any experience of importing and exporting goods? None. Why do you want to import wine? I like wine. I like drinking wine. I like looking at wine. I like the tactility of touching wine bottles. I just like wine. Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to work. Have another glass of wine. You know, at the end of the day, just because you want a wine import business doesn't mean it's going to happen, does it? But like I said, most of us, when we're looking at our partner and we're seeing them thrive, all we feel is the thrill of it. In fact, one of the things that Pattison said about himself career-wise was he was a career accountant, desperate to do something better. And this is again where I think about egocentricity in nature. Pattison had a beautiful 7-year-old child, an outstandingly successful wife, now a home that they can enjoy on the grounds of a school with lots of trappings and opportunity. He had the opportunity to do something better. He could have been an A-grade father and an A-grade husband. He could have been the best of in those circumstances. One of the things that I've always said is people who just believe that careers are everything, you know, all power to you. But let me tell you, the moment you retire, you're not that anymore. And whenever you walk around a churchyard, there's not one headstone that reads beloved accountant, beloved lawyer. They always say things like beloved mother, beloved father, much lost loved son. They represent relationships, the power of those relationships, the meaning of those relationships. That's what life actually is about. It's about those relationships. So he could have put all of his investment and time into those, and that could have made him a better person. But no, he wanted to be more. And he wanted his wife, conversely, to be less. Her success made him bitter and resentful. Her success annoyed him. Her success was a representation to him as a reflection of his failure, not of the fact that as a unit, they could thrive. The bitterness is the pill that he is struggling to swallow. Now, for me, he's textbook as far as a family annihilator goes. So, first of all, he's male. Now, of course, rarely, but it does occur, females do this. But it's about 95% of family annihilators are male. Also, he's in a long-term relationship. He's possessive over his family. These are all traits we expect. Wasn't happy in his career. Also, like I said from my research, he was potentially misusing prescription drugs and alcohol. He also had a history of domestic violence. Also, and this is probably the most pivotal point, he was facing imminent separation, and this tends to be a particular trigger point. It tends to be the biggest trigger point, in fact. Now, there's a guy called Professor Neil Websale. He's a professor at Northern Arizona University. He's an academic who really studies this area. In fact, he wrote a book, if any of you are interested in, called Familicidal Hearts, The Emotional Styles of 211 Killers, obviously looking at those killers and drawing out the commonalities. Now, for him, the idea of the male societal role and males no longer meeting that role is a big driver in family annihilators. So this idea that I'm meant to protect, I'm meant to be in charge, I'm meant to be the one bringing the money in, I'm meant to have this very stereotypical idea and role within the society that has been going on for decades and decades before, and hang on, why isn't this happening? So this kind of rigid belief system is a common trait. And he said he believes that the main reason that men do it is down to rage, revenge, and altruism. So we can look at those. I struggle with the altruistic one, by the way. I'm just going to put that out there right now. So he's categorized these killers basically into two groups. So the livid, coercive killer, that's going to be the one that relates to Pattison. And he would be motivated by anger, by rage. They've got control issues. They'll have been abusive. And the only way that they can achieve their self-worth, essentially, is by exerting authority within the home. So the minute that the marriage begins to fail, because, for example, they're controlling horrible people and the wife isn't happy anymore and wants to take the children, that lack of control, those feelings of humiliation, how dare you leave me, they can prompt the acts of violence that we've been talking about in this case. Then there is the civil reputable killer. This is in very much contrast to what I've just said. And the belief here, and I struggle with this, but the belief here in the research is it's motivated by altruism. So essentially it's saying that when the partner, the male in this case, has this identity which is all wrapped up in his family, so he's basically representative only because his family exists. That's what matters. That's what has meaning in his life. By murdering all the family members, it's a way of, in his mind, saving them from hardship that they might befall. So usually there'll be some financial issues, there might be a bankruptcy, there'll be things he's kept secret from the family, and he'll be so ashamed of what he's done and so ashamed of the impact that that will have on them, and he'll be so terrified that it will destroy them and they won't be able to cope, that he kills them altruistically and then kills himself. That usually happens and is the case. I struggle with the word altruism. I would say that category should just be cowardice, because if you have a situation where your family are facing bankruptcy, usually because of your own actions, and you decide the best way to deal with this is that they never find out by killing them, I don't think that's altruism. I think that is absolute cowardice. Now, also, when family annihilators occasionally actually survive, because not always do they succeed in killing themselves, most of the time the perpetrator will say that they were insane, but I would again question that insanity has anything to do with it. I genuinely believe that for the most it's driven by ego and a belief that they own their family as if that family is property. A case of, if I can't have them or if I can't be with them, then no one else will ever be with them either. And I believe superiority and arrogance is at the central core of both of the things I've just talked about description-wise. Because I believe that if you feel that nobody deserves a choice aside from you, it speaks of a selfishness that has a core that is basically blacker than black, genuinely. If you are somebody who can think, I just think I'm rightfully going to make this decision to end the lives of all of my family, they're not going to have a choice in it. That speaks of an absolute selfishness and ego that is on steroids, in my opinion. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. The inquest into these horrific deaths took place on the 30th of July 2024. That happened at Woking Coroner's Court. And of course, it concluded that Emma and Lettie were indeed unlawfully killed after being shot by Pattison, and that Pattison died by suicide. A statement made by Emma's sister Deborah was read out and described Emma as lightness itself. She said that she was still trying to forgive Pattison. I just think that Deborah is an incredible human being. I do not believe I would afford any forgiveness to this man. She said, I can only speak for myself when I say that I am trying to forgive you. I can only imagine that you are in an extraordinary hell of your own. Maybe he was, or maybe he was just extraordinarily selfish. And maybe he is indeed now in a hell of his own. There was a preventing future deaths report that was created by Richard Travers. And one of the things that they looked at was the deaths and the concerns that they had around it, because obviously shotgun was involved. So when they did this report, they stated that there were 3 concerns. So a shotgun certificate applicant can obtain medication from an online doctor without the knowledge of their GP. So of course that risks a shotgun certificate being given to someone with a relevant medical history, which is problematic. The second one was by consulting an online doctor, applicants get to avoid safeguards currently in place and therefore lawfully obtain weapons. And the third was that authorities should research how a licensing authority can obtain full and accurate disclosure of an applicant's history of coercive controlling behaviour. So they've identified these points that clearly could have an impact in subsequent cases and prevent, hopefully, the deaths of others. Now, the response to that inquest, so on the 23rd of August 2024, Surrey Police actually published their response to the Preventing Future Deaths report. And the Chief Superintendent, Clive Davies, he said that if an applicant for a firearms licence consults an online doctor or obtains medication online, the onus is then on the applicant to disclose this to their GP. He said, our firearms licensing department would not have been aware that Mr. Pattison obtained medication online at the point the renewal was granted. He also stated that the Preventing Future Deaths report had been shared with the National Police Chiefs Council lead for firearms, a woman called Chief Constable Debbie Tedds. The report was also sent to the Secretary of State for the Home Department, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and the Chair of the General Practitioners Committee of British Medical Association for further consideration. So they've kind of sent them to have a look over to see whether there's anything that could have been done. Chief Superintendent Davies also added, domestic abuse in its many forms, whether coercive, controlling, physical, sexual, financial or emotional, must not be tolerated, and we will do everything we can to support those who are being abused and ensure that those perpetrating it are brought to justice. Before I end this video today, I want to leave you with something that's truly beautiful, because after the deaths of Emma and Lettie, after they were murdered so brutally by the man who was meant to protect them, Croydon High School, who Emma taught at for a long time, they came together on the 25th of June 2023 in what can only be described as a representation of love. It was a beautiful day. The school website actually talks about the tribute, and it read, our memorial concert was all we hoped it would be, in parts joyful, poignant, celebratory, and of course, deeply moving. Against the backdrop of our beautiful trees lining the athletics bowl, over 1,500 people listened to some wonderful performances from junior, senior, and sixth form pupils, and a large number of alumni who had joined us especially for the day. These were interspersed with memories of both Mrs. Pattison and Lettie, shared by members of staff. Throughout the course of the afternoon, the younger children enjoyed craft activities on the tennis courts, including painting pebbles with messages and memories which will be placed in our grounds. Amongst many highlights, one that stood out was when alumna Shemia, class of 2021, performed her powerful poem, Loves of My Life. It was originally performed by Shemia as an ode to her year group on their last day in the upper sixth. It was poignant then, but on Sunday, it seemed to have a special significance that was incredibly moving. Guys, I'm going to leave you with that very poem because it is beautiful, it is a tribute, and it is absolutely apt. Do you think there are phones in heaven? A line of communication for the people we used to have? Do you think they'd be able to call down to us? Remind us of who they were? Do you think if I used the 11 digits I have seared into my memory, you'd pick up if they had iPhones in heaven? Maybe even Androids? Or perhaps you could text again. Send each other angel numbers every so often, just so we know that somewhere out there, someone will always be wishing us good luck. At 11:11, you'd know I was wishing for your peace of mind. If I sent you 777, I'd be sending forever luck down your phone. And if I sent 143, you would know that when I say I love you, it transcends the confines of morality and numbers. That in this life, the next life, or the afterlife, 1, 4, and 3 will always be the numbers I assign to your name. Do you think there are phones in heaven? I hope so. Because how else would you know that I would lay down my life for you? It's true. I would lay down my life for you. Because if it wasn't for you, my life would already have been laid down. I would give you my everything, my soul, my love, my time. I'd lend you everything I own, the parts of me that are not even ready to be given. In exchange for your smile, I'd hold your happiness within my fingertips like the very oxygen I need to breathe, like I possess the very elements needed to make the universe go round. You deserve the world, deserve to be bolstered into the universe, around the stars where they belong, to sit amongst galaxies, being able to pick and choose which universe to enter. You made me feel like the luckiest girl in the world, and I can't wait to teach my kids about the love found right here. You were part of my favourite timeline. You belong to a memory of myself that I doubt will ever be let go. A section of my life you filled with promise and indefinite possibilities and promiscuous nights, patient laughter found in a heady mix of poignant nostalgia, an entire history of picturesque reminiscence and angelic purity, destined to remain a pristine souvenir in the history of me, of us, of you. The day our friendship drifts off in the wind, as we go our separate ways, as time dismantles our universe and our galaxy of stars float away, my heart will break into 1,000 tiny pieces only angels will be privy to. But those pieces will be sprinkled with happiness, like fairy dust floating to the sky, painting the world with 1s and 4s and 3s. Because I know, wherever you both may be, even if we never speak again for the rest of our lives, even if you are across galaxies giving your smiles and angel numbers to everyone else, I know I will always, always lay down my life for you. Take care, guys. See you again next time.